Welcome to Health Scope. My name is Teresa McCabe. I'm a public health educator for the Niagara County Department of Health, Environmental Health Division, and I manage a program called Healthy Neighborhoods Program. Today, I do hope that you will stay with us and learn all that you can about one of the deadliest diseases on the planet. Today, we are going to be discussing rabies, and I'm very, very happy to have my friend and co-worker Ross Johnston with us. Ross is a public health technician in the Environmental Health Division, and he is part of our rabies action team. I'm so happy to have you here today, Ross. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely, I'm happy to be here.
We have a lot to teach people today because you and I know how deadly rabies is. Let's start off a little bit by giving our viewing audience a little background about you. Can you tell me a little bit about you?
Yes, I can. I have a master's degree in public health from UB. I attended their MPH program with a specialization in environmental health. I spent some time interning with the Niagara County Health Department in the summer of 2013 and was hired as a part-time employee in 2014 and am now a full-time technician with the Environmental Health Division and a part of the Niagara County Health Department rabies team.
Yes, and Ross is very, very busy. We have several people on that rabies team. And last summer, one of the reasons that I'm doing this is because last summer we had an extraordinary number of animals that were identified with rabies, and that is why you need to know everything you can about rabies, even if you do not have a pet. There are ways that you can come in contact with rabid animals, so please stay with us and please learn everything that you can about this. So let's start at the beginning. What is rabies?
The best way to describe rabies is it is a virus that affects the central nervous system, primarily of mammals. And basically what it does is it's transmitted through saliva. So if you come in contact with an animal that has active rabies and you come in contact with their saliva, it can be transmitted to you. And what it will do is it will work its way through your body and get in contact with your nervous system. And when it gets in contact with your nervous system, you can develop active rabies. And that's when a lot of the symptoms that you're familiar with become present. And it, as you mentioned before, it can become fatal.
It can become fatal. It is pretty much 100%
Pretty much
fatal.
100%.
There are a couple of people who survive from extremely extraordinary measures, but the outcome is not always good. You do not have to get bitten by an animal to get rabies. You can get scratched by an animal that has saliva on its nails from licking its paws, and you can get rabies that way also, so it's scary.
You can also get it from, even if a copious amount of saliva were to be on the fur of an animal and you were to pet that animal immediately after and you had an open wound on your hand, it gets into the open wound, it can be transmitted that way as well. So you want to be very careful, especially when it comes to contact with animals that you don't know where they've been before.
Absolutely, because a pet that would come in with a bite, we would maybe be concerned and start petting our animal or taking care of our animal and not realizing the danger we are putting ourselves in.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about who can get rabies. Well, you said it's mostly mammals, so that means?
Primarily mammals, pets, wild mammals. I do want to make a quick point. Bats, obviously, they're more avian, but they also carry rabies. But it is primarily mammals, and nobody is exempt.
That's right.
You know, there are some that. Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
Well, that's right. No, that's fine. When a mammal should get rabies, what do they look like?
Well, the early symptoms of a mammal getting rabies are usually things like exhaustion, maybe a little bit of nausea and stuff like that. As it progresses, paralysis will set in. The most common symptom everybody knows of, the excessive salivation and stuff like that. And basically, it's all neurological. The disease manifests itself in the nervous system, so you'll basically start to go crazy, and it's a very, very, very painful way to go and a very unpleasant way to go.
Yes, when people get rabies and animals get rabies, it's a horrible, horrible death. People always say, oh, rabies, that's that disease where people foam at the mouth. Well, it's not like a shaving cream can. Your body doesn't make foam, but what happens is the muscles in the throat become paralyzed and they can't swallow their saliva anymore. So what happens to people if they get rabies then?
Well, at the end of the day, they unfortunately they will pass away. They will die because of that. The paralysis, like we said, it basically paralyzes you, and your body is going to produce excessive saliva. You're not going to be able to breathe very easily. You're going to be spitting up and stuff like that. And your brain, it is a disease of the brain, and the brain will eventually shut down. And obviously, once your brain shuts down, that's going to kill you.
So any mammal can get rabies, and can you tell our viewers a little bit about the animals that pose a direct threat? Let's talk about what we call in the health department the rabies vector species.
Yes, rabies vector species are a very important topic to discuss because they are animals that we assume, unless we can prove otherwise, to have rabies. Skunks, raccoons, foxes, bats. These types of animals are wild animals that we assume have active rabies no matter what, unless we can, there are testing mechanisms. We will touch on the testing mechanisms shortly, but we assume that those animals do have rabies until we can prove otherwise.
Yes, these are animals that come in contact with other animals in the woods, but the thing that is very specific about these rabies vector species is that they are the animals that come close to human beings. So when you talk about skunks and fox, raccoons, bats, these are animals that come into people's backyards. Bats can get into people's homes. They can come in contact with your pet. And Russ, I'm out in the community teaching about rabies a lot, and sometimes people say, well, I have an indoor cat. I don't have to worry, but they forget that animals can get in and these animals can get out.
Yes, unfortunately, that is one misconception that people tend to make when it comes to rabies vaccinations for their animals. First of all, rabies vaccination does exist. It is a method of prevention, especially for domesticated animals. It is a requirement, which we'll touch on in a little bit. But people, we hear it all the time, oh, my cat just stays in the house. I don't have to worry about getting a rabies vaccine. However, a couple things could happen. First, the cat could get out of the house, and if the cat gets out of the house and gets in an encounter with a potentially rabid species, and we can't test it, we have to take action to make sure that it doesn't become a threat to the humans in the house. Similarly with dogs, they say the same thing. My dog never leaves the yard. Well, raccoons get into the yard, skunks get into the yard, and if we're assuming those animals are rabid and that animal gets away after contacting your animal, we have to assume that it was in contact with a rabid animal.
Absolutely, and because once an animal like a raccoon gets away, we just can't find that raccoon to test it. So my next question was, can it be prevented? Yes, it can be prevented by, what is the first line of defense for your pet?
Vaccination.
Thank you, vaccination. So let's talk about the New York State law regarding vaccination for our dogs, our cats, and ferrets.
Yes, thank you. The law applies to domesticated dogs, cats, and ferrets, essentially house pets. They need to be vaccinated against rabies starting at 4 months of age. Don't let anybody else tell you any different. The state law is very clear. When your dog, cat, or ferret turns 4 months old, it must get its first rabies shot. That first rabies shot is good for 1 year, no matter what. Always good for a single year. And the follow-up shots are based on what the veterinarian gives, the type of vaccine the veterinarian gives. Most of them are good for 3 years after that. And each subsequent shot also good for 3 years. So you've got a 1 year shot followed generally by 3 year shots. There are a few that they give to cats that are also only good for 1 year, but first shot at 4 months, 1 year, and then 3 years for each subsequent shot.
And will you tell our ferret owners what they have to do? It's a little different than our dogs and cats, isn't it? Every year.
Every year. They need to get their shot done every single year. We don't see a lot of ferrets, at least not at our clinics that we have, but they do exist, and if they do have a ferret, it does need to come every year to get a shot.
Absolutely. Now, our Niagara County Department of Health has free rabies clinics every year, several of them throughout Niagara County. And our first clinic will be in March.
Comes up March. It's going to be in the town of Somerset, and it's going to be March 11th. And that clinic is going to be from 2 to 4 p.m. We we also do yearly clinics in the city of Niagara Falls, the town of Lockport, and the city of North Tonawanda.
Yes, and we have a website. You can either call the number on the screen that we will be showing the graphics throughout the show at 439-7444. You can also get on our website, www.niagaracounty.com/health. And we have the rabies schedule there. So you can even register online now, which is really nice. It saves people some time, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
I know from teaching in the community that there are many misconceptions about rabies, their vaccines, and the pets. So let's talk about some of the misconceptions that people have.
Yeah.
We've already discussed the indoor cat. Some people say, my dog stays with me at all times.
People like to think that their dog stays with them at all times, and I understand what they mean, but they usually mean within the confines of their yard. And while their dog may be confined to their yard, wild animals are not necessarily restricted from entering that yard. Mm-hmm. They can climb over fences. There might not even be a fence for all we know. If that's the case, you leave open the possibility. Dogs don't generally just leave wild animals alone. They're going to go up, they're going to approach, they're going to see it as a threat, and they're going to encounter it.
Absolutely.
And if they come in contact with that potentially rabid animal, if a raccoon gets in there, if a skunk gets in there, we need to become aware of the situation, because that dog could possibly have gotten rabies if it gets into a fight with it.
Absolutely. And so many people have fluffy dogs.
Yes.
And that dog could get nipped by an animal and it won't show because it's under the fur, and we have to remember it's not always a bite. It could be
a scratch.
And that can be really nasty. I was very surprised to hear someone tell me that their veterinarian said that, they didn't have to worry about a rabies shot. Will you please clarify that?
That is never the case.
Thank you.
If you have a domestic pet, a cat, a dog, or a ferret, it needs to be vaccinated against rabies at all times. The vaccine must be up to date. The vet will provide you with a sheet that says when the next one is due, or at least when the shot was given and how long it is good for. And you need to make sure that your animal is up to date at all times.
And what if their animal gets bitten? What's their next step?
If the animal is bitten by a
wild animal.
The
animal comes in, now there's a bite mark on it.
The next step is that you must contact our office immediately. We have a rabies program number that you can call. It's 439-7511, and we need you to contact us immediately. And what we will do is we will begin an investigative process to make sure that there is no threat of rabies to you or to your animal. Ideally, what you would be able to do is you'd be able to catch the animal in some way, shape, or form. If it's a raccoon, get it in a carrier. The dog might even kill the raccoon in the process. But if you can catch or capture the animal, that is the ideal. If that was the case, we would send that animal out for testing in the Wadsworth Laboratory out in Albany. They would check it for rabies, and that would allow us to assess whether there's a threat of rabies to your animal, and by extension, a threat of rabies to you. If you are unable to capture the animal, we need to proceed as if the animal is in fact rabid. And this is where having that up-to-date rabies vaccine becomes very, very valuable. If an animal is up to date on its rabies vaccine and we do not have the capacity, we don't have an animal to test. We can't test the raccoon that your dog fought with, for instance. All we do is we come out and we do a 45-day check on the animal. 45 days after the incident, one of our inspectors will come to your house, make sure the animal's still alive, and it is required after all incidents of this kind that you get a rabies booster shot within 5 days after the incident. So if it happens on Friday, you need to have it by the following Tuesday, or Wednesday, excuse me. But so if it's up to date on rabies vaccine, real simple. We'll talk to one of our inspectors, we'll walk you through the whole process, but it's fairly non-invasive.
There you go. So the biggest thing is, when in doubt, call us. We have several people on the rabies team. There's always somebody there. There's always someone there who can answer your questions. So if you get bitten or scratched by an animal, you go to pet an animal that's on a leash maybe while you're walking down the street, it bites you, we will tell you what to do. And it's really important that you call. That's what we're here for.
Yeah,
right? That's what we're here
that's what
for.
we do.
And the rabies team answers a lot of questions. All right. My next question for you is, what should a person do? Let's talk a little bit about bats. Most people don't know that bats are the #1 spreader of rabies in New York State.
Yes.
They're really, and talk a little bit about how maybe, let's talk about bats and their bat bites and what they look like.
Sometimes they don't look like much of anything.
Yes.
Bat bites are very tiny. Bats have very fine fangs, and because of this, if they are to bite you, there's a chance that you won't even notice that the mark is going to be on your body. It's a very, very fine. It's a little.
Pinpricks.
Yeah, it's a pinprick. It's a very fine incision. If it doesn't happen on the front, if it would be in your back, you probably wouldn't even know it's there.
Absolutely.
Because you can't see it.
People don't always realize that there's a bat in the home, and I do a lot of teaching about this, and I say, do you know what to do if a bat gets into your home? And most people say scream, get the shotgun. One person told me they were going to take out a crossbow, and that's not what we want them to do, is it?
No.
Now, if you find a bat in your home, there's a certain protocol. Please don't kill it.
Don't kill it.
Don't shoo it out of the home.
Perhaps most importantly, don't shoo it out of the home. I mean, we don't want you to kill it. What we really don't want you to do is to compromise the nervous tissue in its head. We don't want you to take a frying pan out and beat the bat over the head with the frying pan, because if that bat was in your home and it came in contact with you, it came in contact with your animal, something like that, we probably want to test the bat. And if you kill it and compromise the nervous tissue of the bat, it may be untestable. And if we can't test it, we have to assume that it's positive. And again, we have to activate our protocols for a contact with a positive animal.
Absolutely. That's such an important thing to remember. I usually tell people, if you wake up and there's a bat flying around your bedroom, get your pillow and blanket, sleep on the couch, just close the bedroom door, make sure the windows are closed, and just keep the bat there until morning, where it can be captured, and our rabies team will tell you how to do that safely. Again, we can answer all your questions.
And if I may, real quick,
certainly,
you do want to make sure that you put it in a container that is completely sealed. Bats fit out of very tiny locations. Yes. They can fit out of, you may think you put it in a little box and the box has some area around the edges and stuff like that. The bat is going to find a way out.
Yes.
You need to put this in a perfectly sealed container. Put on some gloves if you have to. You obviously don't want to touch it yourself, but put it in a container and make sure that container is 100% sealed so the bat can't get out.
Good advice. How do bats get into people's homes?
There's a couple different ways. They fit through very tiny holes, so a lot of the times it gets in without people even knowing. Maybe there's a little hole in a vent or something like that.
Yep.
Sometimes they go in very, very easy ways. Sometimes people open doors and they fly in the house. It wouldn't be unheard of. I know of a couple that got in that way. They go in. If there's a small gap in your house, a bat can find his way into it.
Absolutely, they can.
Being a commonplace.
So there's a lot of protocols for rabies prevention. Let's start with what should a person do? They've been bitten now. What's their first thing?
Go to the hospital.
Thank
Go to
you.
the doctor.
Go to
get medical care
the
immediately.
hospital. Don't say it's just a pinprick.
Exactly. If you are bitten by an animal, your first step should be to go to see the doctor, because, I mean, we're talking about rabies today, but any bite from any animal carries a multitude of other bacteria and other possible things that can happen to you. We're not going to touch on that. I'm not a doctor, so I do not talk about that. But the first step should be to go see the doctor.
The emergency room people will contact us, and then the rabies team will go into action to make sure that they contact you and ask all the pertinent questions.
Exactly. There's a bite form. Anytime any emergency medical treatment facility, doesn't even have to be an emergency, any doctor's office, anything like that, receives a report of a bite, they have a bite form that we fax over. It's our form. The individual is supposed to fill it out. It's not supposed to be the hospital employee. Each person is supposed to fill it out, and they will fax that form over to us. We have our team meetings every morning. We collect the new faxes, and we contact the people that we need to make sure that we can follow through with our protocols with them.
I want to talk about one of the misconceptions quickly, and I don't think you knew that I was going to discuss this, but the good news is that there is a vaccine. And if you get bitten or scratched, Ross knew I was going to discuss this, there is a vaccine that you can be given at the right time if this is determined that you're in a threat for rabies. A long time ago, when Louis Pasteur developed the vaccine, there were several injections that were given into the abdominal muscles. That's not the case anymore.
It is
not at all. All of the injections go in the arm, but it is over a couple of days. You have to show up for like 4 or 5 times.
It's
yes.
a 2-week period. I believe it's a 2-week period. I would also like to clarify, the first shot may not go in the arm. The first shot is the rabies immunoglobulin shot, the RIG,
Yes.
as we call it. And that shot is usually given as close to the location of the bite as can be done. So if you're bitten in the arm, it goes in the arm. If you're bitten in the leg, it goes in the leg. Obviously, if it's a more severe bite, if you get in the neck, you get in the face. Unfortunately, the first shot can be a little bit unpleasant. Don't want to give you a misconception that says that they try to get that shot as close to the bite as possible, though, because that's the one we need. It
beats dying, doesn't it, Russ?
It beats dying by a long
shot.
lot, yes.
Again, this is all done by professional medical people, and you have to understand that you don't want to die from rabies. A lot of people think that, well, you know what, I was bitten, it's just a little scratch, I'm going to wait and see how I feel. What is the mistake with that, Russ?
Well, when it comes to rabies, once you've figured out that you don't feel good, unfortunately, it's too late. Rabies is not a reversible process. It's not a thing where you can go to the doctor and say, oh, I think I got rabies. Can I get once you have active rabies, once it settles in your nervous system, there's nothing left that we can do for you.
No, it is an incubation period. It is a virus. So once it enters your body, it's got to do several things, grow, multiply, and get into the central nervous system. Once it's into that central nervous system, we can't help you.
Yeah.
That's why it's important, the minute you're bitten, the minute you're scratched, and you must teach your children that if they are bitten or scratched by a neighbor's dog, or if they try to pet a stray cat, let's talk about those stray cats, Ross. Homeless cats, also known as feral cats. We have a few moments left, and I want to get this in because this is a real health problem.
Yeah, people love to pet stray cats, feed stray cats, do the whole thing. I'm going to take this time to advise people not to do that. A couple important factors about that. The first one being, you don't know where that animal's been. You probably won't see it again, because if it's feral, it's probably just out roaming in the wild. So if it had contact with a rabid animal and it's rabid, and it bites you, how are you going to know? If it
Absolutely.
bites you and it escapes and we can't test it, we have to assume it's positive. Also, we want to do a little bit of clarification because people don't understand the responsibility that falls on them when they start feeding these cats. Once you start feeding a cat, by New York state law, you are the owner of that cat now. You are responsible for having it up to date on its rabies shots, because an animal that's not up to date on rabies shots you can be fined for not having it up to date.
Absolutely.
You are responsible for all the actions that it does. People think just putting a little can of tuna on the back is not a big deal, but now that's your animal if you're doing it on a regular basis. So you have to take all the responsibility that comes with it.
Absolutely. You're feeding that cat, and the little girl next door wants to pet the little kitty, and that black and white kitty's coming every day to your house. Now he's bitten her. Now you're responsible. Sometimes pets do interact with wildlife. Would you like to discuss any cases that did not have a happy ending?
I would. Unfortunately, when an animal is not up to date on its rabies vaccine, they are at risk of catching rabies from one of the wild animals we discussed earlier. And this has happened, unfortunately, with one cat that comes to mind. There was a case where it had an encounter with a bat. It didn't have any history of rabies vaccine. They had not taken it for any shots. We couldn't test the bat. They let the bat go. And their only options were 6-month quarantine, which is putting the cat in an approved facility for 6 months, and we check it on it every month, or euthanasia. And unfortunately for that cat, we had to go and put the cat down. We had some help from the SPCA, which it was a terrible story.
It is a terrible story.
Unfortunately, the law binds us in terms of what our options are, and those were the only options that we had there. So that is a story that can highlight the importance of keeping your animal up to date on rabies vaccine.
Absolutely. Rabies, again, is one of the deadliest diseases on the planet. It's so important that you know about it, and that is why the law is so strict. And because we do realize that not everyone, sometimes there are finances that are questionable. So our first rabies clinic, again, is going to be in Somerset, March 11th.
March 11th, 2 to 4.
Please try to get there. If you Google it, you might have to write Barker because Somerset and Barker are small towns together. Please take advantage of this. And if your animal has never been vaccinated, you say, oh, look, they're coming to Lockport later on in the year. They're coming to North Tonawanda in December. Don't wait till later on in the year. Don't wait till December. Get your pets vaccinated now. I also want to remind you that I am a public health educator, and I teach on a variety of topics to everyone from little children through adults. And one of my topics, I do teach rabies education to adults and children in a very happy, positive way. Please contact me at my phone number, 439-7479. You can just call the health department. Someone will transfer you over to me. I teach on a variety of topics, and I'm more than happy to teach your group. Once again, I want to thank my guest, Ross Johnston, Public Health Technician for Niagara County Department of Health, Environmental Health Division, Rabies team. And I want to thank all of you for joining us in Health Scope. I really hope that you learned something about rabies today. Know that you are always at risk anytime you pet a stray animal, anytime you feed something, anytime you pet an animal that's on a leash that you don't know. You don't know that just because it's your next door neighbor, if your next door neighbor is a responsible pet owner who has vaccinated their pets. This is always something that is in doubt. So please get those animals vaccinated and stay healthy, stay happy, and please join us again next month for Health Scope.